The dragon-head staff rang out through the Northern Song court. Sai Hoa stood before the Son of Heaven, wielding military authority in a dynasty that disdained martial power and restricted women. More than a widow who lost her husband and sons in battle, she was a paradox of power. A woman who held the soul of an army and guarded the frontier, while real noblewomen like her survived war and political suspicion in the shadows behind. The legend. The story of Sai Hoa is the greatest epic of feminine pride and sacrifice in the military history of East Asia, a stature that transcends mere national boundaries. We speak not merely of a female general leading troops, but of a Yang family matrix, where every woman from daughters-in-law to servant girls like Yang Paifeng could become a seasoned link in the chain of battle when the last man had fallen. Her greatness lies not in individual battles, but in her capacity to establish an empire of morality, within a decaying dynasty compelling the emperor to acknowledge that the survival of the throne depended upon the widows of the frontier. She is proof of how soft power can become a weapon as sharp as any blade when wielded by a strategic mind ahead of its time. Let us journey through the layers of legend from the Yuan and Ming dynasties, down to scattered historical records, to reconstruct her true portrait. To see how the Zi clan, the historical prototype of the Shi family, built formidable military strongholds at Fugu, and how their union with the Yang clan created the most battle-hardened light cavalry force of that era, this is not merely a lesson in military affairs, but in power, in how a woman used her family's reputation to maneuver the pieces on the brutal political chessboard of the Northern Song. What we know for certain is this: without Sai Hoa, the legend of the Yang family generals would be nothing more than a blood-stained page of defeat. It was she who transformed it into an immortal legacy, a symbol of resilience in the face of adversity. The 10th century China stood at a crossroads of chaos and upheaval. Following the collapse of the Tang dynasty, the Five Dynasties and Ten Kingdoms period had left a deep wound. The rise of local warlords kept the land fragmented for 6 tumultuous decades. When Zhao Kuangyin established the Song Dynasty in the year 960, his foremost priority was not territorial expansion, but centralization of power to avoid repeating the mistakes of previous dynasties. The policy of offering wine to relieve generals of military authority stripped commanders of their power, replacing them with civil officials who lacked battlefield experience, resulting in a massive but militarily inept army. The Song court lived in perpetual anxiety before the growing might of the Liao Empire to the north, and the Xixia to the northwest. In regional terms, the Northern Song Empire operated under the philosophy of honoring civil, disdaining martial, concentrating power. In the capital, fielding vast infantry forces alongside fortified strongholds, yet weakened geopolitically by the loss of the 16 prefectures of Yanyun and perpetually torn apart by suspicion of generals and factional infighting. In contrast, the Liao Empire, Khitan, maintained a dual governance system combining nomadic and sedentary elements, building its strength upon superior mobile cavalry and control of strategic mountain passes and steppe corridors, though internal power competition among noble clans remained. Meanwhile, Shisha Tangut pursued total militarization with a tribally cohesive society, deploying camel cavalry and mountain infantry to control the Hexi corridor, though it too faced tensions between tribal chieftains internally. The court's suspicion of martial clans like the Yang and Zhe families was a black hole that devoured the empire's finest military talents. While the Khitan Liao dynasty continuously harassed the border with lightning cavalry raids, the Song court tied its own hands with cumbersome administrative regulations and imperial supervisors dispatched to restrain generals. This was the brutal stage, upon which Sai Hoa appeared she had to fight not only the enemy before her, but also the arrows from behind the slander and betrayal of court colleagues like Pan Mei. This context created extreme pressure. If the Yang clan won too brilliantly, they were suspected of harboring ambitions to usurp the throne. If they failed, they were charged with treason. Whatever the outcome, she could be accused for any reason imaginable. Caught in such a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, she, Sai Hoa, was compelled to operate her clan with the utmost political wisdom. Sai Hoa did not arise from nothing. She was the product of a harsh frontier land where war was the breath of daily life. Modern historical research suggests she was the daughter of Dei, 891 to 955, a seasoned politician and general who had guided the clan to survive and prosper through 4 turbulent dynasties, later Tang, later Jin, later Han, and later Zhou. He ruled the Fugu region, present-day Fugu Shanxi, as a hereditary lord. The Song Dynasty later had to acknowledge the power of the Zhe clan because they held elite cavalry forces, a living shield against northern invasion. He was not merely a warrior, but a man who laid the foundation for stability along the northwestern frontier, making the Zhe clan one of the most prestigious military families of the time. Growing up in a fortress household equipped Sai Hoa with a military perspective that no sheltered noblewoman in the capital Bianjing could possess. She did not learn embroidery, but learned how to read topographical maps and how to maintain logistics for thousands of soldiers under conditions of scarcity. From childhood, she received rigorous training in martial arts and archery alongside her brothers. She was not only skilled in combat techniques, but also possessed deep knowledge of frontier geography and military tactics. Her superiority is most clearly illustrated by the story of her wedding night. With Yang Ye, she sat with her husband and discussed border defense strategies, causing even a renowned general like him to admire her far-sighted vision. The greatest barrier she faced was her gender and her martial origins in a society increasingly devoted to Confucian orthodoxy, where women were expected to submit absolutely. Yet it was precisely this origin that became the salvation of the Yang clan when Yang Ye, a general who had defected from Northern Han to the Song, married her, creating a strategic alliance between the 2 strongest military forces of the frontier. The stakes were mercilessly high. If this alliance grew too powerful, the emperor would seek to destroy them. If too weak, the Khitan would level the border and annihilate the entire bloodline. Sai Hoa understood that to protect the Yang lineage, she had to serve as risk manager, balancing absolute loyalty to the court against preserving the clan's real strength through self-sufficient military estate networks. In popular tradition, her coming of age is bound to the image of a strong young woman who determined her own fate. Her father initially wished to betroth her to Kui Long, a wealthy but incompetent man. Sai Hoa secretly sent word to Yang Ye, asking him to intervene. To resolve the conflict, her father organized a martial contest between the 2 suitors. Yang Ye defeated and accidentally injured Dei when the elder tried to help Sui Long. Furious on her father's behalf, Sai Hoa chased Yang Ye down and fought him in a fierce duel at the 7-star temple in Fugu. After the misunderstanding was resolved inside the temple, the 2 were betrothed, forging a union between the 2 most powerful martial clans of the era. Legend speaks of a fateful encounter at the Temple of 7 Stars, where love was kindled not through poetry, but through the clash of swords. In her youth, Sai Hoa was described as a female warrior capable of breaking the most untamable horses of the Shanxi steppe and wielding a spear with extraordinary skill. She did not merely hone her individual abilities, but directly participated in constructing the defensive system at Yanmen Pass, where the treacherous mountain terrain demanded a flexible light cavalry tactical mindset. She taught soldiers how to coordinate in small units to divide and isolate larger enemy formations, a technique she learned and refined from the very Khitan nomadic adversaries she faced. Sai Hoa was not merely a female general, but the architect of the clan's military identity through a rigorous and strategically calculated method of education. She played the role of strategic matchmaker, actively selecting young women of high martial skill and noble military lineage to become the next generation of daughters-in-law. This approach not only preserved the warrior bloodline, but created a formidable reserve corps of female commanders, women who could discuss military strategy with their husbands on their wedding nights and be ready to replace the men on the battlefield when necessary. Within the household, she maintained an uncompromising family code to instill a military spirit in her children. Her sons, known as the 7 Valiant Sons, underwent martial arts and military strategy training from an early age. A telling example of the clan's strictness is the case of Yang Qilong, The youngest son, who was still punished with 40 strokes of the rod for the offense of leading troops on an unauthorized raid without permission, showing that she and her husband prioritized military discipline above personal affection. Drawing upon the tradition of Song-era noblewomen who taught children military strategy from a young age, Sai Hoa transformed Tianbo Yang House into a true military academy. She directly assisted in training soldiers and established an elite corps of female troops comprising her daughters, daughters-in-law, and even servant girls like Yang Paifeng. She drilled them in synchronized tactical thinking, enabling every member of the household to operate in coordinated combat like a unified machine. After the tragedy at Jinsatan, she taught her daughters-in-law and grandchildren how to transform the grief of loss into national duty. She forged in them the psychological strength to stand firm against court betrayal, emphasizing that absolute loyalty was not merely about protecting the dynasty, but the only way to protect the honor and survival of the clan itself. Her teaching was so effective that even when nearly all the men in the household had been destroyed, the Yang women could still independently organize major military campaigns, such as the Western expedition against Shisha. The Battle of Yanmen Pass in the year 980 was a glorious milestone in Yang Ye's military career, affirming his superior tactical thinking compared to the Song generals of his time. Rather than choosing the passive defensive approach typically used against Khitan cavalry, Yang Ye executed a bold mobile counterattack based on coordinated intelligence and light cavalry technique. When 100,000 Liao Khitan troops poured across the border to attack Yanmen, past the Song forces stationed there numbered only a few thousand. While other Song units were still struggling to form heavy infantry lines, Yang Ye secretly led an elite cavalry detachment, which modern historians estimate at only a few hundred men along a secret route through the rugged gorges of Shanxi province to circle behind enemy lines. Yang Ye's surprise strike from the rear delivered an enormous psychological shock to the Liao forces, who had been confident in their overwhelming numbers. The seamless coordination between the frontal defense at the pass and his flanking strike caused the enemy's formation to collapse entirely. This victory not only repelled the invasion, but earned Yang Ye the fear and respect of the Khitan, who began calling him Yang the Invincible. Although Yang Ye was the one directly commanding the army, the success of this battle bore no small imprint from the support network Sai Hoa had established. As the daughter of the Zhe clan, a military great family with a long history of ruling the frontier, she possessed intimate knowledge of the geography of the Northwest and local communication networks. Sai Hoa is credited with directing the collection of intelligence from hunters and local inhabitants to pinpoint the precise locations of small mountain passes that the Liao forces had overlooked, enabling Yang Ye to execute his flanking blow. She was the advocate for maintaining the flexible light cavalry style of warfare, in contrast to the outdated heavy cavalry tendencies of the Song court. It was precisely this preparation, horses, and light equipment that allowed Yang Ye's force to move at extraordinary speed through complex mountain terrain. The Battle of Yanmen Pass was the first proof of the Yang family model, the husband executing fierce battlefield strikes while the wife managed the intelligence and strategic system from behind, transforming the clan into a comprehensive war machine. Each victory only increased the family's prestige, yet equally increased the jealousy and fear of men like Pan Mei at court. Tensions escalated as her sons began demonstrating exceptional military talent across frontier battlefronts, becoming living symbols of Song power. This cycle of success led to a dangerous escalation. The more the court praised the Yang clan, the more it assigned them impossible missions and cut off reinforcements to test their loyalty. Sai Hoa recognized a cruel pattern. The more they won, the deeper the clan was pushed into the most dangerous positions, where death was nearly a predetermined fate. She began intensifying the training of daughters-in-law and household attendants at the family estate, transforming Tianbo Yang House in the capital into a covert fortress. This was a chain of escalating military victories, paired with a steady depletion of male strength within the lineage, forcing Sai Hoa to prepare for the inevitable collapse of the second generation. The decision that shaped her entire destiny was the establishment of the game rule for the Yang clan within the political context of the Northern Song. Loyalty is the only currency to purchase the clan's survival, but the price to pay is the total sacrifice of every male in the bloodline in exchange for the governance authority of the women. This was a ruthless and entirely rational gamble. In a world where women held no legal voice, Sai Hoa recognized that only by placing her sons and husband in the position of sacrificial heroes could she construct an unbreachable moral shield against the emperor's suspicion. When Yang Ye chose to participate in the Northern Campaign of 986, Sai Hoa had already seen through the conspiracies of betrayal lying in wait. She made a strategic choice not to prevent the men from going to war, but to prepare for a future in which she would be the sole helmsman to reclaim justice for them. This was the moment the game rule was most clearly activated. The sacrifice of the Yang men at Jin Sadan would become permanent political capital for her and the daughters-in-law at court. She accepted the gamble of placing her husband's and son's lives in the hands of a court riddled with betrayal in exchange for the title of loyal and righteous, the only weapon capable of protecting those who remained from purge. The consequence was the collapse of the household's male generation, but it opened the path for the rise of the Yang family, female generals, a unique model of military governance in Chinese history. The ultimate confrontation was not a duel, but the betrayal at Jinzatan and Liang Lanshan, where loyalty was crushed by political scheming. During the campaign of 986, under the terrible and malicious command of Pan Mei, the Yang army was driven into an inescapable trap. Pan Mei deliberately withdrew the relief forces, leaving Yang Ye and his sons besieged by tens of thousands of Khitan troops in the valley of Chenjia Gorge. The fate of the Yang clan was no longer dry historical record, it became a blood and tear ballad of loyalty and righteousness. Yang Ye, imprisoned in the enemy camp, chose death by hunger strike, a final act of defiance before submission, leaving behind an image of unyielding dignity until his last breath. Yang Dailang quietly walked into death, cloaked in a false imperial robe, trading his life for a moment of misdirection for the court. At another crossroads of fate, Yang Xilong survived as a son-in-law of the Liao kingdom, carrying the lifelong torment of being torn between blood ties and reality, a wound that would never fully close. Yang Wulong, unable to bear the accumulated sorrow, turned to Buddhism, laying down his sword to flee a world of unbearable grief. In the most cruelly bitter tragedy, Yang Qilang fell, not by enemy hands, but under a rain of arrows from his own side. Cold testimony to how betrayal can annihilate even the most loyal of clans. For Sai Hoa, this was the heaviest defeat yet, also the moment she revealed the extraordinary command qualities of a matriarch. Amid the weeping of a shattered family, she did not crumble. She immediately activated contingency plans to protect the survivors. She understood that the deaths of her husband and sons had to be transformed into absolute political power to punish the traitors within the court. When news of the disaster reached the capital, beyond Jingxi, Sai Hoa made a spectacular transformation from household manager to sharp-minded political operator. She did not choose passive weeping. She led an army of widows to kneel before the palace gates, demanding justice, transforming personal grief into a political crisis for the Song Dynasty. The Pan faction immediately moved to get ahead of the situation by filing counter-accusations charging the Yang clan with treason. Pan Mei exploited the influence of his daughter Pan Fei, a favored consort of the emperor, to pressure the judges. The case initially fell into deadlock due to corruption. The first judge accepted bribes from Pan Fei to rule in the Pan family's favor, while the second judge, too frightened of the clan's power, fled his post entirely. Sai Hoa, wisely sought the support of the 8 virtuous prince Zhao Defang, a figure of great prestige within the imperial family. Through his intervention, an upright local official named Ku Zun was brought to the capital to investigate the case impartially. The decisiveness of her approach and the irrefutable evidence presented by the Yang clan compelled the emperor to punish Pan Mei. To appease the clan and recognize their absolute loyalty, Emperor Taizong officially appointed her as military commander and bestowed upon her the Dragonhead staff, granting her supreme authority over male generals and the right to enter the court without ceremony. This act established a rare precedent in Song history, a martial clan defeating the civil official faction through the legal system and popular support. But the true battlefield called again when the dynasty once more fell into peril before Xixia's invasion, and the court had no male general of sufficient prestige remaining. Sai Hoa made a momentous decision. She would personally lead the army together with the 12 widows of the Yang clan to the frontier. This was a pivot from clan defense to direct military offense in the name of the nation. She transformed the reputation of Yang family female generals into an elite special force where gender became a psychological advantage in psychological warfare, leaving the enemy bewildered by the unconventional tactics of women. Her appearance on the battlefield in old age was a declaration that the Yang bloodline would never run dry so long as women still stood firm. Amid the smoke and fire of battle against Xixia, a symbolic image was seared into the memory of tens of thousands of soldiers, the Dragonhead staff of Sai Hoa. The scene is described as the camera circling around her, a white-haired woman in gray battle robes standing firm on her command chariot. When enemy forces began breaking through the left flank, she struck the dragon staff hard against the wooden floor, a sharp, metallic sound ringing out like a command from the heavens. This was her signature move, using the dragon staff, not merely as a weapon, but as an instrument for coordinating the intricate Tianmen battle formation. The act of striking the dragon staff signaled Mu Guiying's female troops to charge from both flanks, executing fire attack and dispersed cavalry tactics to divide and isolate the Xixia formations. She needed no sword in her own hand, yet every time the dragon staff moved, thousands of soldiers repositioned themselves like a precise clockwork mechanism. The image of her standing calm and still amid the chaos, using the authority of a supreme matriarch to hold steady the morale of frightened soldiers, was a moment of supreme power. The dragon staff was no longer a prop of old age. It was the embodiment of imperial edict and the indomitable will of a clan that had sacrificed everything for the dynasty. Under the direct command of Mu Guiying, Sai Hua's daughter-in-law, the Song forces initially achieved many brilliant victories. She deployed fire tactics with great sophistication to annihilate thousands of Xixia elite cavalry, breaking the initial encirclement. During a reconnaissance effort to find a secret supply route, Mu Guiying was lured into an ambush by Xixia troops in the Gulu or Lingzhou mountain gorge. She and fellow female generals Jing Jinhua and Dong Yuene fought heroically to the death under a volley of arrows after refusing to surrender. After Mu Guiying's death, Song morale was gravely shaken. At this moment, Sai Hoa, though already at an advanced age, some accounts say 60 legend says past 100 personally donned armor, took up the Dragonhead staff and went to the front to command the final decisive battle. She led the remaining widows in a swift counterattack that completely defeated the Xixia invaders and compelled them to withdraw from Song territory. Though the campaign ended in total victory for the Song, the Yang clan had been nearly wiped out in terms of command personnel. The true climax of Sai Hua's story lies not in battles fought on distant frontiers, but in the moral and power conflict at the very heart of the family. Once she held supreme military authority through the dragon staff, the court began to fear a women's kingdom beyond the control of traditional Confucian order. Certain officials began whispering that she was raising the younger generations to know only the Yang name and not the emperor, creating a serious rupture of trust. Sai Hoa faced a cruel choice: continue holding military power to protect the people or disarm to protect her grandchildren from court purge. Within Tianbo, Yang house cracks also appeared as the daughters-in-law began to weary of having to continuously sacrifice husbands and sons for a dynasty that never ceased to suspect them. Sai Hoa served as the supreme judge tasked with balancing national loyalty against bloodline survival. In Song-era Chinese culture, the ancestral shrine was the most sacred space, the place where the clan connected to the past and affirmed its oath of loyalty. The image of a night of rain symbolizes the accumulated darkness and sorrow across generations. When the punctured armor and broken spears of fallen husbands were brought and laid before the ancestral tablets, the patience of the daughters-in-law had reached its limit. The protest of the daughters-in-law, led most often by the senior daughters-in-law or younger widows, centered on two core contradictions. They questioned why the clan had to continue sacrificing for a dynasty riddled with treacherous officials like Pan Mei, the man who had indirectly killed their husbands. Under Confucian teaching, women bore responsibility for preserving the bloodline. Allowing the last surviving grandsons of the Yang family, such as Yang Wenguang, to continue going to war was seen as an act of self-genocide against their own lineage. They wished to retreat to the Wutai Mountains, where Yang Wulong had taken his vows to live a secluded life, far from the toxic political vortex of Bianjing. The uprising unfolded in silence. Rather than open argument, the daughters-in-law refused to receive military orders or knelt silently before the ancestral shrine, but turned their backs on their battle robes. They removed their warrior garments and dressed in mourning white, signifying that they were now only mothers and widows, no longer soldiers of the Song. She did not use her military authority to impose by force. Legend tells that she struck the dragon head staff against the hall floor, not as punishment but to recall the oath of Yang Ye. The body may die, but the heart of loyalty must never be lost. She pointed out that if they withdrew, the enemy would flood in, and no mountain would be safe enough for their children. The climax of the confrontation came when Sai Hoa declared that she herself would be the first to go to battle. The image of a white-haired grandmother ready to sacrifice her own body caused the daughters-in-law to awaken. They realized that loyalty was not about serving the emperor, it was about protecting the land where their ancestors lay. This conflict ended with all 12 widows donning their battle armor once more, creating the legendary 12 Widows Western Campaign. This is a moment of high symbolic power. They fought not on the king's orders, but for the honor of the clan under the guidance of their great matriarch. Yet in the end, she made a painful decision. She would bear full responsibility before the court, except close surveillance provided the Yang lineage was still permitted to maintain its martial tradition to defend the frontier when needed. This was the inner battle between a mother who wished to protect her descendants and a general who wished to protect the kingdom. The life of Sai Hoa concluded in a quiet contemplative note as she withdrew to the rear, leaving behind an immense but contested legacy. Legend says she lived past 100, becoming a spiritual anchor for 4 generations of Song emperors. However, modern historians point to a harsher truth. The character of Sai Hoa with the dragon staff is largely a fiction built up over centuries to compensate for the Song dynasty's actual military failures before the northern powers. The real woman behind the legend, Lady Zhe, likely lived a quieter but no less tenacious life managing military estates along the frontier. There are quiet whispers that the Song court in fact deliberately allowed the Yang men to be destroyed in order to eliminate an overly powerful local military force, and that the legend of the widows was a way to appease public sentiment. Yet regardless of how thickly historical truth is veiled by the mists of time, her shadow still falls long across the cultural consciousness of China. She is the answer to the pain of a people who felt humiliated, proof that when the structures of male power collapse, the resilience of women will be the final bastion that keeps society from disintegration. The legacy of Sai Hoa lies not in the military campaigns marked on maps, but in her redefinition of sacrifice and female power in a merciless era. She taught future generations that the true strength of a clan lies not in the number of troops and horses, but in moral cohesion and the capacity to transform grief into the driving force of action. The core moral argument she left behind is this: loyalty is not blind submission, but a commitment to protect the shared values of the people, even when the leaders of the dynasty do not deserve such sacrifice. She transformed the position of widow into the position of guardian. She transformed loss into an immortal legacy. The story of Sai Hoa is a reminder that in the darkest of moments, the wisdom and resolve of women are the guiding light for the survival of a civilization. The image of the dragon head staff striking the floor of the hall still echoes a timeless warning about responsibility and honor. If you find the strategic journey and resilience of Sai Hoa to be an inspiring source of insight for leadership thinking and personal strength, please leave a comment sharing your perspective on the role of women in military history. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to join us in exploring more legends and historical truths about other great clans. Share this video if you believe the values of loyalty, righteousness, and wisdom embodied by Sai Hoa deserve to be spread more widely in the world today.